Ladies and gentlemen, you are live. Episode number 20 of Material Issues. I'm Mark Hershberger, Pop Detective Records. There's my very good friend, Mr. David Myhr of the International Pop Overthrow Festival, looking snazzy as always in his paisley and his bowler. David, how you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling well, Mark. I'm looking forward to episode 20. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? I really.
Well, we would.
But I really thought, like, after episode 3, they would have just shut us down completely. But
well, the first couple of episodes, we were, shall we say, a bit racy. Once we decided to have guests, things kind of calmed down.
And once we wore regular clothing and everything like that, we kind of gelled into what we are today.
Don't you miss my little Bo Peep uniform?
I do miss your little Bo Peep outfit.
Yeah,
but
I kind of thought.
Every show's got to go through its growing pains, if you understand what I mean. How's everything else? How's everything else treating you? You are now looking forward to IPO New York. That's the next one on the docket?
Yeah, we have 3 in November.
3 in November.
IPO New York, Boston, and Hamilton, Ontario.
Very good.
Little bit of concern was the one in Ontario because they've had some COVID issues that we've sort of reconciled at this point. They haven't. There are also certain guidelines that need to be followed. Like you need to have a negative COVID test within 72 hours going in and out of Canada. So if somehow I test positive in Canada, that means I have to quarantine there. So there is a bit of a risk, but I'm willing to take it at this point.
Sure.
I certainly look forward to it. Beyond that, let's see. I know there's a bunch of stuff I wanted to tell you. But I guess the most fun one is that I got the George Harrison Uber box a couple of days ago.
I saw that. It looked like a shoe shine kit. I thought that was George Harrison's shoe shine kit. But my God, David, I looked at the retail price of that thing. And then after I got out of the bathroom for about 25 minutes, I had to come back and look at it again. What a box.
I fortunately did not have to pay the retail price. Not even really all that close. So. Yeah. I had to go for it. It's just one of those things where I said, if I don't go for this one, I may never see it again for this price. And eventually they're all going to be sold out and collectible. So,
wow, if you got a good price on it, then
this is the time to get it. And so I did.
I know how you like playing with little garden gnomes. And, we're all looking forward to the pictures of the garden gnomes. And
well, the garden gnomes have been soiled now, Sir Hershberger, so I can't show them to anybody.
Oh, but I'm glad you got it, man. It looks like a pretty awesome box set. We'll look forward to hearing what you have to say about it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I've also gotten a whole lot of great new releases, including one by the gentleman who we're going to have on in a few weeks, Todd Taylor.
Todd Taylor.
For those of you listening who don't know who Todd Taylor is, he's a British gent who fronted a band called Advertising back in the days of New Wave, and in 1980, I believe, released an album called Jingles. I always thought the band was called Advertising Jingles because of the way the cover looks, but it's just Advertising, and it's really good stuff. And after that, he went on a solo career where he did stuff that was a little bit more straight ahead pop, just really kind of fun, playful lyrics, and just a lot of upbeat stuff. It was great. He released his first album in about 14 years, I think, a few months ago, called Frisbee.
Frisbee, yeah, very good album.
Got it in the mail today, and it's really great. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's
we're looking forward to having him on. Of course, Ronnie Barnett next week. Right now we have a very special guest. It's somebody who I'm pleased to say I've known for now about 25 years. We met at the Poptopia Festival in, I think it was 1997, but he'll be able to tell us for sure. And we've kept in touch over the years. He's played IPO a couple of times. He's one of the main men, I will dare say the mainest man of one of the best bands out of the Swedish pop scene, that very fruitful Swedish pop scene of the 90s. They were called the Merrymakers, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners know their stuff and love it. And they put out a couple of albums, a bunch of singles. And since then, he has put out 2 just dynamite solo albums, and hopefully working on a new one, because, I cannot get enough of his material. So without further ado, would you please give a huge Material Issues welcome to the one, the only Mr. David Myhr.
There he is.
Hey.
Good evening.
Great to see you, David. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for a great introduction. I am very honored to be here.
And we are happy that you stayed up until midnight Sweden time. For myself, it's only dinner time around 6 p.m. and David's in the middle of the afternoon. We're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, but we like
yourself. I need a nap. I'm 63 years old. I need a nap.
You need a nap anyway, 4 times a day. But we've been Scandinavian way. This is our 3rd time now heading Scandinavian way and keeping people up very late, and we do greatly appreciate it. And you're looking fantastic, my friend. I met you originally live back in your solo tour when you were in New York City. And I still have the pictures to prove it. So I was there, which was
super nice.
Which venue was that, Mark?
Which venue was that? I'm trying to remember the venue. It was I can't remember.
It was a cool little theater. Wasn't it on 72nd Street, or did I dream that?
It was on the upper. It was on the Upper West Side, but I can't remember the name, because it wasn't something that you normally think.
I have to Google David Myhr live in New York City.
Definitely post a comment.
I'm sure some of our viewers were there, so maybe they'll post a comment and let us know. That'll be good. I'm trying to remember, but it wasn't one of the normal places you would think of, like Joe's Pub or something.
I remember it was not Madison Square Garden, that's for sure.
It was just. I think it was one. It didn't
Madison
quite hold as many.
Garden has a small office. In there.
I think it was the office of Madison Square Garden's ticket sales.
I'm reading on David Myhr's. West 72nd Street. Yes. Cool little venue called Stage 72.
Stage 72.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so it was on John Lennon's home street. So that was kind of an extra bonus.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You're up near the Dakota. Yep.
Yeah. I think of all, because I went to New York University in the late 70s, early 80s, when John was living there. I think of all the times, I could have gone and maybe run into him, because he would, as you know, I'm sure he would communicate with his fans. He, if people came up to him and said hi, he wouldn't walk away. He'd start talking to you. And
that was
these
cool.
opportunities, and I'm kicking myself. Such a tragic thing, of course. But
I
wish I could have met him.
I went there 8 years after what happened with my Merrymakers friend Peter when we were 18 years old, and we went to the Café La Fortuna where he and Yoko used to go, and
wow,
we went everywhere he used to go. It was like a pilgrimage.
And I grew up right near Allentown, PA, and he used to bring Sean down to the park in Allentown all the time because it was his getaway. And I used to roam that park all the time, and I kicked myself. Yep, that's where he and Sean used to come down, because it was only an hour and 10-minute drive with their chauffeur. And I kicked myself. I used to walk around that park all the time, and he was probably sitting on the damn park bench. But looks like Mr. David Myhr is a Beatles fan, as we have a beautiful Hard Day's Night poster right behind him. So,
yes, one could say I'm a small Beatles fan. That's true.
Were they a big part of your childhood?
It was. I was born in 1970, like a month before the split up of the Beatles. So I can say that I was there around when they were around, but. I was 10 years old when John Lennon got murdered, and then it was then when I kind of discovered them for real and saw all the TV programs that went on and read everything and bought all the books and started to chase down their records. It wasn't like a kid nowadays who discovered Beatles, they can just click Spotify. I had to go and ask for recordings from my teachers, my aunts, my cousins, and get it all together. So it took a few years. But it started with the tragic death of John Lennon for me. That was when I kind of, I lost interest in everything else that I had been interested in before, and became a Beatle maniac in my teens, where my classmates were into heavy metal or synth rock pop or something like that. I was kind of totally off.
Now there are as we all know, there were so many great bands, and still are, that come out of Sweden. What kind of music programs did you guys have in school? Because, you know, a lot of kids today, and it's getting back to where it's acceptable, at least, but we did not grow up with good music programs at all. There just wasn't a budget for it. But what about you guys?
When you say music program, what do you mean specifically? You mean in school or like programs that you could? It's not
in school. In school, so that everyone could afford to go.
Yeah, I mean, there is like we have the everyone goes to the same public school. Nobody pays anything, and in that school we have like quite elaborate music classes. There's instruments to fool around with and play around with. Although I don't think I learned so much in school, actually. I think it was more hanging out with the elder rock bands that were around. And there was a kind of a community of rock bands in Piteå, my hometown in the north of Piteå, called Rip Rock, where there were bands that were 5 or 10 years older than us, and they played the blues, but they also played their own pop songs, and it was like they were my heroes. And there was this community school as well that you could take classes that play piano, play guitar, and I played some piano, but it was mostly classical. So I think we learned the most by listening to our elder idols, and then going back to the music classroom after the school closed and stay there.
And I asked this question of a lot of the guests, and it's surprising the answers. But were you yourself formally trained? Did you take piano lessons and then guitar lessons along that route before you got into your own, scene that you in writing and such?
Yeah, well, I was inspired by my brothers who were back at home, actually on this very piano. I brought it down to Stockholm, but they played a little bit, and I took some classes, piano lessons, but it was playing Beethoven and stuff like that. So that was my formal training when I was 9, 10, 11 years old or something like that. But I had one brother called Svante who taught me to play the blues, and the blues scale, and then he showed me a couple of chords on the guitar, and I kind of, so this is how it all fits together. And then I learned by ear, so I could hear a song on TV, and I went to the piano and I could play it, and it was kind of something that wasn't taken for granted, but I had that knack for that.
I was going to say it's a natural gift, and
well, yeah, but you need someone to give you kind of the key. Look, here's a chord, and you can change chord, and then it. But
the light bulbs go off, and you get it. I mean, exactly. when we talked to Jason Faulkner, his answer was the same thing. It's called the light bulb goes off, and it's talent. And you have yes. Seriously, it's talent. It's you got it. You got the gift, and things work musically in your head, where a lot of people those things don't tie together, and it just doesn't get to that level.
Maybe well, Jason Faulkner is a good example of a highly skilled musician, but I think all great musicians they have listened and learned by just trying to figure out what are they doing, if it's from a record or from a TV program or at the local rock concert. very seldom it's like a teacher training you year after year to follow a certain path. I think it's more normal maybe in the classical world. Maybe prejudice, but I think it's more normal because you have the sheet music. You're supposed to play this. You're not supposed to write your own songs necessarily.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah.
Who are some of those bands that you idolized? Anybody I know?
Well, I mean, of the local scene, you might not know. Although there were a couple of, for instance, future members of Popsicle were from Piteå, so they were around, and you might not know about Bo Kasper's Orkester, but and then 1 hour south of Piteå there was Skellefteå, where there was a big indie pop scene with the Wanted Eyes and This Perfect Day and all those bands, but that came later when we were like 20 years old. And we heard about it, and we were kind of, what's going on there? Why do they have such a fruitful pop scene? And why does everybody write about them and not about us? Yeah. It was more about envy rather than actually looking up to them. Although I think they are great. I know Per Wiksten now, and the One of Eyes was a great pop band.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
Indeed. When you talk about where you came from, Piteå,
yeah,
and the surrounding Sweden pop scene or so. We've talked to some Scandinavian, some Norwegian artists, and it's kind of a pretty close-knit small community. Is Sweden basically like that as far as the whole of the country? People know everybody because it's not so huge, so to speak.
Well, maybe in a way, but I think there's always certain genres and certain groups, and we in the Merrymakers we kind of felt outside of any kind of community because we were doing this a little bit retro, very much Beatles influenced style, whereas the hip and happening bands, they were more in the indie pop, shoegazing, I don't know, Brit pop, whatever you call it. And maybe they were cooler than we were, but we felt kind of misunderstood for quite a while, and we were a confused band. We in the beginning we had like five members, where 4 were singers songwriters, so it was like a little traveling Wilburys without the superstardom. Well, now I'm going off on a tangent here because the question was about Sweden and the music scene. I think local in Piteå, there was a strong community, but it wasn't like we were in touch with bands all over Sweden at that point. Later, when we were signed to a record company, you knew a few bands, and a few other bands knew each other, and so it's difficult to sum it up. But one thing is for sure, and that's it's dark and cold up in Piteå. The winter is, I don't know if you know about Celsius degrees, but minus 25 was kind of normal in February, and super dark. You didn't see the sun at all, and lots of snow. So it was a good atmosphere for going down in a basement and play rock and roll, as opposed for maybe in Italy, you go out and have an ice cream. You don't write any songs.
When did the Merrymakers form?
Sorry?
When did the Merrymakers form?
Me and Peter, we already had a band when we were like 15, 16 in 85, 86, playing blues and ZZ Top covers and stuff like that. But then when we were 18 in 88, we decided we're going to form a band playing our own pop songs, and that was called Ant Manson, named after our surnames, but translated roughly to English. And that developed into a quartet, which then changed name to the Merrymakers eventually around maybe 1991 or something like that, 92 maybe. So it's difficult to say when the Merrymakers actually formed, but we became the Merrymakers around 91, 92.
And why Merrymakers? What's the story behind the name?
Because we were looking for a better name, and our drummer Kenneth said, we need a name that describes who we are. And and we were happy party people drinking quite a lot. And I looked up in a dictionary, festpris in Sweden, party people, and then it was like the Merrymakers, and it sounded like this, Merrymakers sounded a little bit 60s, sounded nice. Later, Andy Sturmer, which we will probably get to, he thought, calling yourselves the Merrymakers is like putting a clown's nose on the Mona Lisa. you guys write serious pop. You should be called Bubblegun.
Yeah, I remember having a phone conversation with you about that.
Oh, wow.
Before the album came out, you had told me that Andy wanted you to call yourselves Bubblegun. I tried to convince you to keep the Merrymakers. I thought it was a better
you won.
name. I'm glad you did.
We had this idea of party people. We're cool. We're drinking beer, but we didn't see ourselves like the people in the medieval times dancing around the king, like merrymakers. Anyway, it's like any band name is bad until it's kind of
good,
established. I mean, when I heard the Cardigans calling themselves the Cardigans the first time, it was like, how can you call yourself the Cardigans? But even the Beatles is a bad name if you.
I've said that a lot. If you just look at that name, Beatles, and you say to yourself, all right, yeah, one of the greatest bands of all time, if not the greatest band, and then you go, look at the name. The name is really kind of silly. It's just Beatles, but it's a great play on words. That's the Lennon side of the play on words, but it's Beatles.
Think of how many bands were influenced by that name. How many the bands came out of that, and how many bands misspelled their names purposely.
Of course.
How influential it was. Yeah. I just think it's funny that Andy Sturmer said, listen, you're a serious pop band. You need to call yourself Bubblegun.
Yeah.
As if Bubblegun is that much more serious than Merrymakers.
Later, as the history went on, we decided to call our second album Bubblegun instead of the bands, and so now I'm quite happy with the name.
Yeah,
David, let me tell you how I found out about your music. A friend of mine, Jordan Oakes, I don't know if you know him.
I remember
he ran a magazine called Yellow Pills. Apparently, he had one of his subscribers was from Sweden and sent him a tape of a whole bunch of Swedish acts. Now, you guys weren't on it, but bands like The Wannadies and Stars on Mars and Beagle, who I already knew, and a few others were on, and it was just mind-blowingly good. So I said to myself, I have to find these records, and I have to find out about more bands. So, back then there was no internet. I had to look in Goldmine magazine to find an ad by a Swedish record store. So I found one by a record store called Najpraj. I don't know if I'm Nice Price, of course.
Yeah.
But our listeners know. Anyway, I had to call them because I'm an impatient bastard and there was no internet. So I got on the phone with the owner, and it turned out he said, well, we're coming to Los Angeles to see, I guess, Sweden's soccer team was playing a match. So I said, I want these records and these records. And he said, yeah, we have those. And I'm like a pig in heaven right now. And I said, anything else you can recommend? And he said, yeah, there's this band called the Merrymakers. I think they'd be right up your alley. So I said, well, bring that too. So this is what he brought me. I'll let you hear this.
There was a young boy named Alex. He sat in his room and stared at the world.
We won't play the whole thing, as great as it is. But that was the first song that I ever heard by the Merrymakers.
Oh, wow.
And this was the single that he brought me. There was actually a price tag on there. I took it
I've
off.
got that. I've got that as well, yeah.
But
That's fantastic.
This is where it all started. And
I wrote that on this on this piano in PTO.
Nice.
Look out, with one hand and like sideways. That's impressive. So it all started from there, and I think I may have gotten a hold of you maybe a few months later when email happened. I may have gotten a hold of you. I'm not sure, or if maybe we had just met at Poptopia, but soon this came out.
Right.
As soon as I heard the first song, She's a Radio, I said, well, that should be on the radio. And like every other song was great. But then you and I met at Poptopia, and I feel I'm sort of like partially responsible for you guys playing it, because Tony Perkins had asked, well, I'd asked Tony, can I bring some bands to your attention? And he said, sure. And you were one of them. And
All right.
So then he invited you to play. And, you know, I'm jealous because the Merrymakers have never played IPO, but it was just the timing of it was perfect for you to play Poptopia. Now, was that 96 or 97?
I think it was 97. No, it must have been 96, because we recorded with Andy in. Oh, this is difficult. I think it's 97 because he came here later and recorded, and yeah, it was in January something.
Yes.
Yeah. But we did play 2 years in a row. Was that Poptopia the second year as well then?
Oh, then it must have been. Maybe
Yeah,
it was 96. Oh, yeah, 97 to 98 when you played Spaceland. And
Exactly.
And there was the El Nino, and it was, oh my God. But anyway, yeah. So, and I guess we all went to David Foley's house, didn't we?
Oh, we did, yes, because we were playing the Troubadour in that was the 97 one, right? The first one. When Robbie Rist played drums and
Yes.
and this girl whose name I now forget backing us up on bass, and then
Lisa Michaels,
we were like,
maybe?
sorry,
Lisa Michaels?
no. Anyway, we were like in heaven. We are at the Troubadour where John Lennon got thrown out during the Lost Weekend. We are playing to, I think Mick Fleetwood was in the audience.
No
from
way.
Fleetwood Mac.
'Cause I was there too.
My brother, so Nicholas, who you
Yes,
know,
I
he
was there.
gave him the CD, and he's like, now we have played here. Now we have to drink 10,000 beers. And suddenly the place were closing. We were out on the sidewalk, and then Dave Foley showed up. Well, we could go to my place. And yes, we went up to the, I don't know, to the hills or something like
Yes,
that.
it wasn't the Hollywood Hills.
With
Very
the
nice guy.
with the Mockers, with Seth and from
Yeah.
the Mockers and Tony, and yeah, lots of fun. And then a few days later, we actually had planned to see Andy Sturmer for the first time in person like that at his home in Oakland. And we were obviously super nervous about going up there to see him, and it went really well, and he was super kind. And then we told him that we went to Dave Foley. You guys went to Dave Foley's house the other day? What the hell? He was kind of impressed with us hanging out with him.
Dave Foley was one of the members of the comedy troupe, The Kids in the Hall, comedy troupe from Toronto, who were just incredible. And yeah, coming full circle, when we did IPO in Toronto, the first 5 years were at the Rivoli, which is where Kids in the Hall pretty much, you know, made their name. So it's sort of the equivalent of going to the Cavern, because in Toronto with Kids in the Hall. So that meant a lot. And actually, after one of the IPO shows there, I ran into Dave. He was sitting at the bar with a beautiful woman, and he was like about 3/4 in the bag and in a very good mood. So,
Wow.
and he actually remembered me. So that was cool.
Yeah,
That's
I wonder.
pretty
I would. He had definitely a good sense of music. So I wonder if he has found my solo albums. I need to call him one of these days.
Yeah, I hope so.
I mean, and talking about Merrymakers a little bit. I mean, obviously, you know, you have a love for jellyfish and layering of sounds and that is the kind of thing that turns me on. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, the songwriting process with the Merrymakers and how you approach that in the studio and built a lot of those songs from essentially what would be either piano or acoustic demo, and now it really is a layering of wonderful sounds. I'm curious as your process.
Yeah, I mean, I said we were a confused 5-piece band up in Piteå, but we had big ambitions, and we wanted to make a demo that sounded like a record. And we had this guy called Thomas Nyström, who was 5 years older than us, who kind of was more skilled musician. He sang great, and he kind of helped us arrange a little bit more thoughtfully. But we were heavily influenced by Jellyfish, who in their turn were heavily influenced by all the other bands that we were influenced by. But they kind of showed the way on how to package all these influences in a fresh way. It sounded like now music, although it had its roots obviously in the 60s and 70s. And we listened to Belly Button to death, and we loved the way they were stacking harmonies, like so I have a note and then the next one and the next one, and we kind of overdubbing it, double tracking, and then we released this one, Andrew's Store, in 1992, where even the cover looks a little bit jellyfishy, and we have this song Andrew's Store with and ding 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 pling plong plong. But the process was just making up a melody and then packaging it in the way we thought sounded best, which was using all those same tools as they were using. And Andy actually got that EP sent to him, and we saw them, Jellyfish, live in Stockholm in 93 or something, and he said, "Hey, you're the guys who made Andrew's Store." And we're like, "What? You know about that one?" "Yeah, wow. My mother even likes your music better than mine." and then the band changed. A couple of members left, and Anders Hellgren joined, and we moved to Stockholm, and we thought we're gonna make a record on our own. And we went to a studio. We were allowed to play around there. It was a studio that ABBA had used back in the 70s, and but we didn't have like engineer or producer. We just made everything ourselves, and Anders was the musical motor in the band. He kind of programmed every hi-hat in the Atari computer. I played a lot of instruments, and we built it up from scratch, and thinking about every note. Whereas on Bubblegun, it was like we formed a band, because then Andy was on drums, and we had this guy Thomas from PTO, Thomas Jernqvist, on bass, and we were kind of more rocking in the studio live, then adding the layers afterwards. But
well, did you when you approached layering and adding, would you get to a point and you'd sit back and you'd listen and be like, let's go a little bit more here. Let's go a little bit more here, because it's not quite,
it wasn't like we were layering as much as maybe Jellyfish did later on Spilt Milk or like Queen or something. It wasn't about that. It was more like we like 3-part harmonies. Our voices blended nicely. Peter had this little more Johnish voice, and I had the little more Paulish voice, and then Anders came on top with like an extra Paul, and we like 3-part harmony sound. And we also like this kind of, if I sang, "She's a radio, she brings me all the news," and then Peter was good at saying, "Take me up back and da da da." So that was kind of answering vocals more than stacking harmonies all the time. Right. But yeah, it's that music production is about figuring out when it's finished. It's difficult. You can add things, but it becomes problematic. It doesn't sound better the more you add. You have to find the perfect spot to, this is it. We have it now.
And did you guys write songs individually and then?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question, and I remember those couple of albums that we did when Anders, Peter, and I worked together. That it was all about who has the best melodic idea, and I might have a verse, and then Anders might have a chorus melody, and Peter came in with something, and I added a bridge to that. So it was very much co-written. Although there was always one who took the initiative for a song. So it's like the one who sings the song is the one most likely to have kind of initiated the song. But almost every song that we had wrote was a co-write, because I struggled with lyrics more than Peter and Anders did. So they helped me out on Monk in the Middle and what other song? well, Monkey in the Middle is a good example. I had written the whole melody. I didn't have a word. And then they sat down and they called me and said, now the song is called Monkey in the Middle. And I said, okay. So
Which
yeah.
leads me to another question, though, for you personally, because you carried on that production value into your solo work, which is quite obvious. For you, when you write, is it melody first? Is it lyrics first? What comes easier for you? It's
what's always melody for me. I love sitting down at the piano or at the guitar and just making up a melody with some chords. And I've never written a lyric first, and only recently I have started to use a technique that I try to encourage my songwriting students at the university to do, to start with a title rather than singing something. Oh, now I have to find words that fit with da 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 da. So, for instance, on my first solo album, the second solo album, Lucky Day, I have a song called The Perfect Place, where I just had written down, like every good songwriter has to do, jot down titles now and then. And I looked at the list and, well, The Perfect Place, how can I sing that? The perfect place, the perfect place, the perfect place. Oh, that's a good one. And from there, the melody went on.
I'm glad you did it that way, because that's my favorite song on the album.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
Well,
go.
it's a good technique. And on my latest EP, and now this that I released this year, I had a song called We Wanted to Shine that I wrote together with Brad Jones. And it was the same thing. I sat with a book, and I sat here and I said, I need to begin with a title. I grabbed this Tom Petty interview book. Whatever is on the page where I put my finger, I will write that. And he was talking about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers playing at the tribute concert for George at Royal Albert Hall. And he said, we really wanted to shine. And I said, okay, pick up the guitar. We wanted to shine. So that's a nice process that I will explore more.
There's a good question from John Kirby. He said, did you ever consider how you would do those songs live? He worked for Queen, and they could not do those great harmonies live.
No, they could not.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's a good question from John.
I mean, we've never had proper tours, or we didn't have lots of gigs to begin with, but we did play now and then, and it was always difficult with the monitoring situation, hearing each other and hearing your own voice and making sure that the harmonies are working well. So it was a struggle with the live thing. I mean, again, Jellyfish were the heroes on that, because they had really learned the parts. I remember Andy told us that Chris Manning, Roger's brother, he had to learn the harmony like it was the fucking lead. So he sang like strange notes, but like it was the lead. And I think you need to be really good singers and just step up to the microphone and know your harmony, and then hope it all goes well. But
when you went to visit Andy, was that with the purpose of him producing you, or had that already been established, or did it happen after you visit?
It started in the early days of email, when one day when Anders and his girlfriend was at my apartment here in Stockholm, an email came in, like one of the first emails ever. Hi, it's Andy Jelly. Can I get your music here in San Francisco? And we were like, what's happening? And long story short, we sent him our first album, No Sleep Till Famous, and this one, and the demos for the next one, which became the Bubblegun album. And he replied and he said he loved the album and the demos. We should discuss the possibilities of working together.
Wow!
And that started like communication between us, and we became completely mind blown. And how can we solve this? Because we already had a little career going in Japan, and we told them about this thing about Jellyfish, and they were Jellyfish fans as well. And then the Swedish Virgin Records got involved, and they were Jellyfish fans. So it was like us together with the record companies. We all wanted to bring in Andy. So eventually a contract was signed, and when we came to see him, we already knew that he was going to come to Sweden to work with us.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Which was kind of a rare thing, because he only ever worked with like Black Crowes and a bunch of Japanese artists and not many others.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Japanese version of Bubblegun, since you brought up Japan. There must be at least 15 different versions of Bubblegun. It's like, oh, we're waiting for there you go. There's a bunch of them. We're waiting for the box set.
The Japanese box set.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. Are there any plans
with garden gnomes?
The gnomes. Oh yeah.
Did you hear that, Dave? That's great.
I gotta pull out the gnomes from the Uber box and show everybody. Are there any plans to do a vinyl reissue of Bubblegun? Because I know I would love one.
Well, I would love one too. Basically, there are no specific plans, but it has popped into my head at some point. But as you know, we're not an active band, and we rarely talk to each other, and it needs to come some kind of initiative from somewhere, from like a record company. If someone brings it up and wants to do it, I think we would say, yeah. I mean, only last year, this came out, The Best of the Merrymakers, a Japanese compilation that I was heavily involved in putting together with like 23 songs. And sorry, David, Magic Circle was going to be on it, but
it was the first thing I saw, and I said, I don't know if I want to buy. No, I'm kidding.
So I mean, that was a nice surprise that they were. It was Sony Japan who released this one. Unfortunately, it coincided with the pandemic and everything closed down and nothing happened. But so I'm not saying there's never going to be a Bubblegun vinyl. It could be nice.
Well, you'd think that the natural course would be John Kirby, put it in a wooden box with statues. Yeah. The natural course would be a Japanese release, because Bubblegun did so well in Japan. So I mean,
they don't do a lot of vinyl these days.
They don't do a lot of vinyl though in Japan.
David, you and I will talk. I think I have some labels that might have an interest in this.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask you a quick question about the new EP with We Wanted to Shine. The video is fantastic with that. It's very. I look at it and think it's kind of Monty Python like with the head and the crumpling of the paper. But the one thing I got to ask you, which I noticed right away, the bass player is fretting with his hand, the drummer's drumming, but your character doesn't move his hand at all. And I said, well, maybe he doesn't know the chords. I'm not really sure.
That's interesting. I will talk to the talented video editor Alexander Edström, who put that together.
I was going to say, who did that?
Yeah, he used some material from a green screen session. I happened to at the university where I teach, which actually is in my former hometown in the north, in Piteå. I sometimes bring in external producers to give lectures to the students, and obviously I have brought Andreas Dahlbeck, who plays drums with me, and also Brad Jones, even from Nashville, to come there. Wow. So at one point they were both in the building, and I made an interview with Brad Jones that is on YouTube. It's called David Myhr in Conversation with Brad Jones.
Yeah,
and I brought them in both to play, and then I had them stand in front of this green screen and like 10 minutes, and then that material has been used even 2 times, because I have a song called My Negative Friend with a great video where it's the same guys, same. So that's why the chords doesn't work on 2 songs.
Well, you've always made really, really good videos as well, as far as your solo work is concerned. I mean, really, you really take that to an art form as well. Besides the music being as good as it is.
Thank you for saying that. I sometimes think about, my God, I have really worked hard on getting these songs out, and sometimes you share them on Facebook and you get like 20 likes, and I was like, oh, So
Yeah,
you make me happy. You encourage me to do more. Maybe I will get
Please.
30 likes someday.
All right.
No, you know, you have to keep, as I tell my daughters all the time, you got to keep throwing darts, because sooner or later you're going to hit the bullseye, and it just takes one little spark of somebody sharing it to the right place, and all of a sudden, you know, your likes go from 30 to 30,000, and But if you don't do it, it's never going to happen. So
exactly.
So when did the Merrymakers break up, and why? And then what were you doing? What were you doing between then and when you put out Soundshine?
Those are good questions. And as I told you, we were a 5-piece band, and then it kind of evolved into this 3-piece with me, Peter, and Anders doing the 2 albums, and we were kind of really focusing on the band and our career and the Japanese thing, and we tried to get the albums out in the US, and we signed to a label called Big Deal in New York. Looked promising, but then they were bought up, and there was a confusion going on. Peter got tired of the unsecure situation. He never knowing if you can pay the rent at the end of the month, and he wanted to come back to, I think, the North. So he left the band right about that time when we were going to make it in America. And then we kind of took him away from the artwork. That's why it looked kind of strange here.
Yeah.
It was kind of, you know, how the Russians did when they crossed out people from pictures. We took away Peter's vocals. We took him away from the pictures. Not that we didn't like the guy, but we couldn't sell ourselves as a band that is about to split up. So suddenly we were a duo, and we worked hard with our Japanese connections. We wrote new songs, one of which is on the Best of the Merrymakers, called Everything Is Wrong. But then it came to a halt around 2001, I think, because we became kind of bitter with the situation in the US, and the Japanese people, they wanted the same song over and over again, because Monument of Me, our first single, was like the big radio hit, and we weren't able to write the same song again because every song sounds different. And we kind of started to focus on building a studio and producing Japanese artists instead, and kind of forgot about writing songs, which was a shame, because I mean, we had melodic ideas, but there was lyrics missing, and we went for ages on getting the right sound in our new studio. And suddenly the years started to roll by, and we had to think about finding, building families, or, something else, and not just Merrymakers all the time. So we had our studio. We worked with Japanese artists in the 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then around 9, 10, Anders said, "Why don't we just sell the studio and maybe split up the band as well?" And I said, "Yeah," because we weren't doing anything. An odd gig in Spain and a little almost reunion thing in PTO, but what happened then was, I think Anders would probably describe it differently, but I had the feeling that I had lots of musical ideas, and I had the feeling that Anders doesn't like any of them. And of course, if you're two in a band and you don't kind of help each other, you need a third person to kind of solve it. And we didn't have that third person. So around 2010, when we split up, it was like, now suddenly all my songs are approved by me. So I'm going to make an album. So basically, that's the long answer to your question.
And here is that album, I assume.
Yes.
And yeah, you turned up the jellyfish art style like to 10,000 here. It's an awesome cover.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that one.
But even better, the songs on here are great, and there's a lot of variation. One song that was different than anything I thought you had done with the Merrymakers was "Got You Where You Wanted," which is very soulful. It kind of has a Motown feel to it.
That particular song, by the way, is an example of how a song idea can start, because Matthew Sweet has this song called "Sicko Myself." Or is it like this? Yeah, something like this. And I thought, that's such a cool song. I'm going to write this instead. so it's like, you need to start somewhere. And then of course, lyrics and melody is completely different. But sometimes you only need some kind of spark of inspiration. So that was from Matthew Sweet. Thanks, Matthew.
The album was received very well, and you started doing gigs. Of course, I remember you playing in IPO London.
Yeah.
How did it sell well? Did it sell all over the world?
It sold very well all over the world. That's what's called a fake news, right? Alternative facts. No. I mean, I cannot say it sold well all over the world, but it seems like it found its way to previous Merrymakers followers. I had a label in Japan. I had a label in Spain. My main label, Lojinx, in the UK. So I can't tell you how much it sold, but for me, it was a big relief to get these songs out and suddenly be an artist again instead of sitting in the studio working on the bass drum sound. It wasn't my environment. So I felt really relieved and happy with the reception. Although, of course, I don't always get all the money back that I invest in studios and musicians, but I take that cost.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for David to ask the question that I always love when he asks it when it comes to
I've already asked
artist.
David that question when I met him in 1997 about especially Scandinavian bands singing in English and then speaking in Swedish or whatever their language is in between. And had you ever? I remember asking you, had you ever considered speaking in English in between the songs? And you said that would be way too pretentious. We would never do
that. In a concert.
Yeah. In a live setting, you're presenting your songs in English, and David, I always laugh about it because then you watch some videos and things, and they turn and they speak to their fellow musicians or to the audience in their native tongue, right? And then it's right back into an English language song, which it's understandable to sing and write and whatever in English. And the other question that David would ask, and I love the question, is when I mean, you've probably had English for many years in your schools. That's what they do in those countries. Do you write in English? Are you thinking in Swedish? How does that juxtaposition of two different languages when it comes to your songwriting? And
I mean, it's true that Swedes are, as opposed to, for instance, Spain. My wife is from Spain. They never speak English in school. Well, they learn it, but they rarely speak it, and they don't see it on TV because all the movies are dubbed to Spanish, and it's like I think we are good at emulating here in Sweden, and so
because you have a very good command of the English language. I mean, your lyrics and the rhymes and the way the way it flows. It's like,
But in answer to your question, I think it's because all the music that I love is in English. I have very few Swedish artists singing Swedish as favorites. So I kind of, when I think of pop, I think of the English language, and I don't start to write a line in Swedish and then translate it. It wouldn't make sense. So I just sing gibberish until suddenly there's a word that kind of recognizable, and I start from there and I look for the rhymes and then I build something up.
Do you ever dream in English?
I often dream about meeting Paul McCartney, so obviously it must be in English.
Love that.
I just think it's because we don't grow up here in the U.S. with, learning a specific other language for many years.
We take them in high school, but we only really learn to read and write them. it.
Exactly. We don't
we're not
learn to use it. So I couldn't even imagine, even though I had 8 years of German and 8 years of Spanish, I couldn't imagine someone's telling me sit down and write a great pop song in German, which
Right, no.
I've never heard a really good German band sing a pop. It just doesn't work in that native language, but I couldn't do it. And I'm always very impressed with those people that can and do it well. Not that you're just doing it, but do it so well,
Well, those lyrics that I have written on my own, I'm always a bit nervous about the language. So I on Lucky Day, my second solo album, I'm very blessed to have the first song, Jealous Sun, lyrics by Blue, Room to Grow, lyrics by Bill DeMain, Every Day It Rains, lyrics by Steve Shields, Wait Until the Moment, lyrics by Brad Jones, Love Bug, lyrics by Linus of Hollywood. Although there are a couple of ones. The Only Thing I Really Need Is You and The Perfect Place, which are lyrics completely by me. But I'm just saying I love to have my Bernie Taupins coming in with lyrical ideas that are native speakers. It helps definitely.
Yeah.
So here's the thing with pop. Well, I can't speak for every pop fan, but at least for me, it's most important that lyrics sound really good. That they work well together as a soundscape. I don't absorb the definition very often, unless it, like with 10cc or Sparks, because it's so silly. That stuff gets in there, but when it's really deep, not too up, except for The Perfect Place, actually, for some reason those lyrics really
I mean, we have all listened to lines like Sundays on the phone to Monday, Tuesdays on the phone to me. Oh yeah. It sounds great, but what does it mean?
It doesn't matter though. We love it anyway.
And I know we're coming close to the end of our hour, David. I wanted to make sure we talked about the brand new, relatively new EP. When was And Now This released? That was.
It was in. Was it possibly in May or March?
June.
Yeah, it was before the summer, at least.
Before the summer.
Yeah.
Once again, another batch of great tracks from classic David Myhr material, and of course I love that video, which is one of my best things. But what's the future hold as far as a new album? I became a father a year and a half ago, which is fantastic. Obviously, hello to your lovely wife. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And it doesn't help if you want to make an album when you only have like 15 minutes a day to do something else. So it will probably take a while. Although I must say that this particular week, only last weekend, I went to Andreas Dahlbeck, the guy who always played my drums on my records and helps me co-produce, and presented some new Myhr DeMain, Myhr Brad Jones ideas. It's sounding promising. So I will just have to look for the time and money possibly as well. But it might take some time just because of lack of time. I have teaching jobs. I make advertising jingles, as you said, and but you'll wait.
But that's always the case with our most favorite of artists. It's like, when's the next one coming out? Gosh darn it.
There's a trend now of not releasing albums, just releasing a single here and there, an EP here and there. And I know it's not for David Bash, but once you've done that, you can put it all together into an album.
That's true. That is
tell him to gather like 12 singles and wait. And then play all 12 back to back.
The word "wait" is not in my vocabulary. but because of that, it's because of that IPO happened. It's because of that I discovered the Merrymakers, because I made that phone call to Sweden instead of writing a letter because I couldn't wait. So sometimes patience is not a virtue. The last thing I wanted to ask you, David, is you were mentioning teaching. Tell us about what you're doing with teaching songwriting classes.
Yeah, I mean, I start by saying that you can't teach songwriting, so you should probably kick me out of the classroom. But then I I tell them that you can always become a better songwriter. And this is something I learned from my academic friend, Joe Bennett, either by listening and analyzing what's already out there, your own favorites, check out what they are doing, listen carefully, learn from that, apply it on your own writing, practice a lot, and write to constraints. Tell yourself you're going to write a fast song today, and you will do it. So with those 4 tools, you can train yourself and become better and try all those tricks that I'm trying to teach, like start with the title, or don't bore us, get to the chorus, make the song shorter, and all that stuff. So I'm trying to help my students improve to become what they want to be as songwriters.
That's great. Do you think you have anybody promising, somebody you think has potential to,
Yeah, I mean, I meet a lot of talented songwriters. There's one guy called Ludwig Hart that has new stuff out sounding like Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty vibe, 80s kind of arena rock. He used to be my student. I didn't teach him a lot. He was just giving me a lot of good songs to listen to. And probably more people that I forget now, but it's a tricky world when 60,000 songs are uploaded to Spotify every day. So everyone is not going to become a new Sara Larsson or a new Benny Andersson.
Yeah. and real quick, your thoughts on the new ABBA.
Oh yes, I have. That's another hour there if you have the time. But in short, I must say I'm really impressed. It was it was bound to become a disappointment, but I really like the song "Don't Shut Me Down." I actually rehearsed it the other day with my Super Trooper, my ABBA tribute band. Right. That we have been having for 20 years, where I put on the Benny Andersson wig and the platform shoes. I love that song, and I also did the world's first cover of the other song.
I still have faith in you.
Yeah. So you can look it up, David Myhr. I still have faith in you. About the world's first cover, together with Peter Quinn. So
I've heard it.
Yeah. So I'm really impressed with ABBA. They have a good marketing campaign going.
As always. David, thank you very, very much.
Yeah,
for
thank you so much. An hour goes fast.
It really does.
It sure does. But that's okay. That just means when the time comes for a brand new David Myhr album, we're going to have you right back here on episode number 247 of Material Issues
in 2024.
That's right.
There you go.
Looking forward to that.
Thank you so much for joining us. Get to bed over there in Sweden. I know it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. We do appreciate your time. This has been a great thrill talking with you virtually.
Thank you for your interest and your support throughout all the years. Very highly appreciated. Take care.
David, have a great night. Thank you again. Good night. Peace and love.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it, David Bash. What a fantastic episode number 20 with David Myhr of the Merrymakers and of his solo work. I mean, that was wonderful.
Yeah, no, he's great. Both musically and as an interviewee. So
yes,
we're
indeed.
Glad to have him.
That flood. And my friend, what do we got coming up? We've got October 6th is Ronnie Barnett from the Muffs.
6th is Ronnie Barnett from the Muffs. Right. Of course, that'll be a lot of fun. He's a fun guy. And of course, he's got lots of stories. October 13th, as I mentioned, we have the great Todd Taylor. So glad that he's back and doing stuff again, and it's really good, like I said. Right. And both of us have been talking to some other people. I'm gonna put a little feeler out there because it's almost 95% sure. But if anybody remembers the Head Boys and their one fantastic album, I'm talking with George Boyder of the Head Boys, and I think he'll be on an upcoming episode. I hope so. The Shape of Things to Come.
The Shape of Things to Come. Yep. And why that band had one great album that did very well and then disappeared, and that was it. So it's a big mystery.
Yeah, big mystery, but unfortunately not an unusual tale.
Not an unusual tale.
Record business, I'll tell you.
but it makes for a good material issues episode down the road.
Sure it will. So I'm going to go continue to drink my Diet Canada Dry or zero sugar Canada Dry ginger ale and lemonade, which is awesome. But
And this
I
is
can't
not
find
even
it anywhere anymore.
We're not even sponsored by Canada Dry. If Canada Dry executives are looking at this program right now,
if you can find this in regular or diet anywhere you live, buy it, because I can't find it anymore. Buy it. Send the diet to me.
My friend, always great to be with you. I'll catch up with you next Wednesday when we have Ronnie Barnett right here on Material Issues. That'll be episode number 21. Thank you to everybody who watches this episode with David Myhr. It's been a pleasure. David Bash, have a great night.
Thank you, Mark, as always. You have a great night as well.
Good night, everybody.